Moving ahead now, the literary world is still mourning the death of renowned Nigerian poet and novelist Gabriel Okara.
Well, the founding father of African literature, Gabriel Imorotimi Okara, died at the age of 97, just 4 weeks before his 98th birthday.
He was famous for writing poems such as Piano and Drums and The Call of the River Nun, which won the best all-round entry in Poetry Prize at the Nigeria Festival of Arts in 1953. Details in this special report compiled by Cyril Abaku.
For Gabriel Imamotimi Bangbang Okara, life was one rich harvest on the eyes of literary longevity. Born on April 24, 1921, he was educated at the prestigious Government College, Umuahia, in the 1930s and 1940s. By the following decade, Mr. Gabriel Okara had, by dint of personal learning, emerged at the vanguard of a new literary tradition in Nigeria, ushering the continent into literary modernism with his legendary 1950 poem, The Call of the River Nun.
I hear your call, I hear it far away, I hear it breaks the circle of these crouching hills.
Some 4 years later, he again blazed the trail for other writers by becoming the first Nigerian writer to publish in Uli Bear's interventionist journal, Black Orpheus, eventually joining its editorial board shortly after. His 1978 collection of poems, The Fisherman's Invocation, won the Commonwealth Poetry Prize the following year. The maturity of his lyrical vision, with an approach to language that remains deeply symbolic, while maintaining a rather swift succession of lines, flows into a stream of qualities that make his poetry gold standard in modernist scholarship anywhere in the world. Okara incorporated African thoughts, religion, folklore, and imagery into both his verse and prose. His first novel, The Voice, published in 1964, is a remarkable linguistic experiment in which he translated directly from the Ijaw language, imposing Ijaw syntax onto English in order to give literal expression to African ideas and imagery. The novel creates a symbolic landscape in which the forces of traditional African culture and Western materialism contend. Pa Okara, after several years, returned with the collection The Dreamer, His Vision in 2005, an instant success which became a joint winner the same year of Nigeria's highest literary honor, the NLNG Endowed Nigeria Prize for Literature. In 2009, he received an honorary membership award from the Pan-African Writers Association. Mr. Gabriel Okara also had stints in public service. From 1972 to 1980, he was director of the River State Publishing House in Port Harcourt. His final call may not be a journey on the waters of the River Nun, but its course runs beyond the river of mortal life.
What a rich life. Well, TVC News Deputy Assignment Editor Cyril Abaku joins us now to talk more on the life and times of Professor Gabriel Okara. All right, Cyril, it's good to have you here. And I know you're an ardent follower of Professor Okara.
Yes.
I mean, his soul rest in peace. But there's this talk about the piano and drums. I can relate with the River Nun book, which he wrote. But tell us about what makes the Piano and Drums, the book written by Professor Abaku and Professor Gabriel Okara, what made it stand out?
You know, piano symbolized European culture. Drums, which you refer to as rustic, you know, in that poem, symbolize African culture. And you know that in those years, and perhaps even up until now, there was always a struggle about the identity of the African, the ideology to follow, the Western versus the African. And so Okara was one poet who exceptionally knew how to balance contrasts, how to balance symbols and, you know, delicately just put them side by side and let the reader judge. He was that brilliant poet who understood imagery, who understood symbolism, who understood life, particularly talking about its inner complexities. And so that challenge had always been there. Piano and Drums was one poem that, perhaps better than any other poem of that era, you know, succinctly and skillfully put out that challenge that many Africans, or particularly Africa's emerging political class, had to deal with. The fact that we are Africans on the one hand, and then on the other hand, we've been colonized, and so we are struggling with being African and at the same time having to deal with Western values that we have been given under colonialism.
Right,
so,
and talking about being African, some would also say he projected the Nigerian. We've seen the eulogy that the governor of Bayelsa State has said in his honor. But how do you relate with the man who was versed abroad and still could relate with the common man in Nigeria?
You know what happened was that Okara, after he left Government College Umuahia, he became a bookbinder. And so
in Nigeria?
Yes, of course. Working then in the Eastern region. As a bookbinder, he came under the influence of several authors. And so, one thing about study is that the more you read other writers and you feel that there's a lacuna about where you come from, you want to fill that gap. So the first thing Okara did was that he began to translate oral literature into English. It was in the course of doing that, Enugu had a lot of hills. Maybe one day the inspiration came and he said, I hear your call. I hear it far away, breaking the cycle of this crouching hills. He was talking about the hills in Enugu. Okay, so his environment influenced him, his culture. The fact that the generation in Nigeria then had not caught up with education as much as the East and the West had done. And so he was more than just a poet. Right. He was a visionary, was a progenitor. He saw a gaping need that needed to be filled. And so as poet, he was a cultural activist, he was a poet, he was an educationist, he was a lot in one single breath.
A man with a rich profile as this now, what's it for the younger generation? I mean, who wears Professor Okara's shoes?
Well, you know that in Nigerian literature, we like to talk about the Mbari group, for instance, Soyinka, Achebe, Okigbo, and the rest of them. Okara came before them and didn't go to UI. Everything Okara achieved was based on personal tuition. I think that in our age, social media may be a big distraction to some of us, but if you can take out the time, know what you want to achieve, and then as a young writer, do a lot of introspection and reflection and, take a step back and think deeply and then begin to write, you would be able to do something tangible for yourself and for your society.
I mean, there must be something about that generation. You just mentioned Wale Soyinka, Professor Okara, and co. I mean, that generation was to live in. So we have a lot to learn from it.
TVC News Deputy Assignment Editor Cyril Abaku joins me now to talk more on this. Cyril, it's good to have you join me. That report there compiled by you out there. But let's talk about Okara. The point there is, what really stands him out differently? We understand that he's a self-taught individual who, by circumstance, fell in love and got his passion from, issues around him and all of that. But what is unique and peculiar about him?
Before he came on board, there were some experiments. Abiose Nico, we had the likes of Castle Hayford, we had the likes of even Dennis Chukwudo Osadebe. But call it a gift, call it a passion, call it resolution or whatever. He was the one who, essentially, the publication of The Call of the River Nun was significant. It was different.
I remember reading that many years ago.
Of course. As soon as it came on stream, it was clear that a new benchmark had been set. And so all the other poets that, that followed, the likes of Okigbo, actually, Okigbo is seen as the finest in Africa to date. But the fact is that somebody before he came on board, had set the benchmark, and Okara did it. The fact was that, as at that time, not many writers were able to draw from a variety of influences.
Around them?
Around them.
Okay.
I mean, when I was privileged to have gone to Okara's house at Marine Base in Port Harcourt, there was a piano in the house, even at that old age. He loved music. And then he was also so deep into the cultural practice of his.
All right, we had at his time Okara, we had Achebe, Wole Soyinka, J.P. Clark. You mentioned Okigbo now and all of that. If you fast forward to this generation, who are those that we're going to be calling apart from the older generation? Do we still have people who are writing phenomenal, books about either in poetry or in prose or in drama, in play, as the case may be?
I think we have to admit that poetry is the queen of the literary arts. But the fact again is that I think because some of poetry is not always easily accessible when you read it, people are tending towards the novel more. So you have people like Chigozie Obinna, you have people like Chimamanda Adichie, people like Tony Khan and so on. But, you know, people, of course, they are writing, but our attention is shifting from poetry, so to say, which is not so healthy. What we even have in terms of performance poetry is good, but it does not really cut the ice for me the way traditional poetry, you know,
maybe the trends have changed, and then the performance poetry is the new norm now when it comes to poetry. We have the spoken word and so many of those performances.
When we define poetry, we like to look at economy of words.
Okay.
But when you want to make it a stage thing, you tend to douse that obscurantism, which poetry should naturally sort of convey.
What would you say about the issue of reading culture now? A lot of people just want, like you talk about the performance poetry. It's more entertaining for anyone to just sit down and listen to all of those instead of reading it and imagining or visualizing it.
And sucking you in.
And exactly.
It's not there. A popular Nigerian commentator in the 80s, I can't recall his name, but it was very popular. He used to say, maybe if two teams are playing the game and one team was about to score, he would say, will this be it? Will this be it? Okara said in his poem, will this be it? That phrase, will this be it, came from Gabriel Okara. You know, so, but, Mike, the fact is that we're losing something by not paying attention to what really matters. We need to go back to that place. We cannot say that because we're in a particular age, we should shift from, we should water down the quality and suit the time. There's the debate of the age and the spirit. The spirit is very important.
Yeah, Cyril, there's a lot talk about, or so much talk about the issue of the curriculum, the Ministry of Education, or even the government deliberately guiding the society in a certain way. You're talking about the issue of we need to bring these cultures back and all of that. What has the curriculum got to do with this?
Well, the choice of people that we put for students to study either at the A level and at the O level must be authors who have earned it, not authors who have political affiliation. Must be authors who have, and not authors who, because of perhaps the particular state they come from, you want to put them there. There should be authors, you see, an author's worldview matters. Like I said, Okara blends a lot of culture, a lot of influences into...
So he cuts across.
Of course he does, but not many people are able to do that today. Okay. And so you need to be sure that people, and then again, I think that by now, we should have a national endowment in his name.
Okay.
2 years ago at Unipa, there was a festival.
That's a way of honoring him.
Of course.
Thank you very much, Cyril Abaku, for coming on the program.
Thank you, Mike.